The rider from the coast reached me 2 days south of my own sea gate, and he was weeping before he was off his horse. I had been called inland by the crown, a summons stamped in wax I could not refuse, to a council of alpha kings who meant to carve the failing frontier between them like men dividing a carcass. I went because a king goes when the crown calls, and I told myself the coast could keep itself a fortnight without me. I told myself Tittleholt had stood 400 years against the sea and would stand a fortnight more. I was wrong, and the rider's face told me so before his mouth could. "The guard has left the sea gate, my lord," he said. His horse was blown, ribs heaving, foam at the bit. He had ridden it near to death. Raider sails on the black water at dusk. 16, maybe more. The garrison saw them, and he stopped. He was a young man, and he did not want to say the next thing to his king. They ran, my lord. Captain Orrin took the horses and the men and rode for the high country before the moon was up. He said the hold was lost. He said no wage was worth dying at a gate the crown had already given up on. Something in me went very still. Not my wolf came later and came differently than I expected. This was quieter and worse. The still of a man who has left a door unlocked and hears, from very far away, the sound of it opening. "The hold," I said, "the people in it." "Left, my lord. The Fisher families, the old ones, the gatekeeper's household. No horses for them. The garrison took the horses." His voice cracked. "There's near 100 souls behind that gate, and no wall of men in front of it." And then he said the thing that turned my blood to river water. "But she wouldn't come, my lord. When Orrin called the retreat, the gatekeeper's daughter, Eibhlin, she wouldn't leave the gate." I had not heard her name spoken aloud in 3 years. I had trained myself not to say it, the way you train yourself not to press a tongue to a broken tooth. And now, this boy said it in the rain with his dying horse between us, and every wall I had built came down at once. "Say that again," I told him. "Eibhlin, my lord, the gatekeeper's daughter. She sent the children up into the bell tower, and she barred the outer doors, and she stood at the sea gate with her father's old boar spear, and she told Orrin to run if he was going to run, but she was staying, because someone had to stand where the people could see them standing." He wiped his face with a filthy hand. "I only got past because she opened the postern for me herself and told me to find you. She said," he faltered. "She said what?" "She said, 'Tell the king his gate is still held. Tell him it will be held when he comes.'" I did not remember mounting. I remember the storm, the true storm, the one that had been walking up the coast all that gray day and now broke over us both. And I remember turning my horse's head north into it. And I remember that the last thing I said to the boy was to get himself and his horse to shelter, because I would not have another life spent on my account this night. Then I rode. Let me tell you how I lost her, since you will not understand the writing otherwise. 3 years before that storm, Eibhlin was the gatekeeper's daughter at Tittleholt, and I was the young alpha king newly come to a hold that hung off the edge of the map like a coat off a hook. Tittleholt was the last loyal sea gate on a coast the crown was already quietly abandoning. Too far, too poor, too battered by the northern raiders who came each raiding season out of the fog. My father had died holding it. I came to hold it after him, 26 and certain and alone, and the first face I saw when I rode through the sea gate was hers. She was up on the gatewalk mending a hinge, her sleeves shoved to the elbow, a smear of iron black across one cheekbone, and she looked down at her new king with no more awe than she'd have given a gull. "You'll want to mind the 3rd step," she said. "It's rotted through and no one's mended it because no one's paid for the timber." Then she went back to her hinge. I want to tell you my wolf rose the moment I saw her, that the bond struck me like the old songs say, thunder, a howl, the world narrowing to one face. It did not happen like that. What happened was smaller and I did not understand it for weeks. It was this. I walked into that battered hold, a stranger to every stone of it, and when she spoke to me about the rotted step I felt, absurdly, that I had come home. as if I had lived in that hold my whole life and only stepped out for an afternoon, as if I already knew where every cup was kept. I did not know then that this is how the bond comes to some of us, not as a fire, but as a recognition running backward, the strange, sure feeling of returning to a place you have never been. I spent that whole first year not understanding it. I thought I was only lonely. She kept the gate books and mended what the crown would not pay to mend, and argued with me about timber and salt stores, and whether the bell tower ropes would hold another winter. She was not a soft woman, and she was not a bold one either, not in the way the songs mean bold. She was steady. She was the steadiest thing in that whole leaning, salt-trotted hold, and slowly I came to arrange my days around the certainty of her, the way you arrange a room around a hearth. And in the second year I understood what she was to me, and it terrified me, because in that same season the Crown sent word that they meant to pull the frontier back inland and leave the coast holds to fend or fall. And I, young and certain and a fool, believed that if I loved her openly, if I claimed her as my mate before the hold, I would only be binding her to a gate the Crown had already sentenced to death. I would be marrying her to the sea and the fog and the raider sails. I thought I was being noble. I have had 3 years to learn how much of noble is only fear wearing a good cloak. So when the Crown called me inland that second winter, a long posting, a year and more, to argue for the coast at councils that had already made up their minds, I went, and I did not speak. I did not claim her. I told myself I was protecting her from a doomed hold, and I rode away from the one person the bond had given me, and I let her think she had misread whatever had grown between us in the gate books and the arguments over timber. I still remember her face at the sea gate the morning I left. She did not weep and she did not beg. She stood on the rotted third step, mended by then, mended by her own hands, and she looked at me the way she'd looked at me the first day, level and clear, and she said, "Go on then. The gate will keep." And I understood, from the particular steadiness of her, that she knew exactly what I was doing and exactly what it was costing us both, and that she was too proud and too kind to make me carry the guilt of her tears on top of the guilt I was already choosing. I told myself for 3 years that I had done the right thing. Then a weeping boy on a dying horse told me she was standing alone at that sea gate with her father's boar spear while 16 raider sails came out of the fog, and every lie I had told myself washed away like chalk in the rain, and I rode north into the storm to reach her or die trying. The coast road in a northern storm is a cruelty. The rain came sideways off the black water, and the wind tried 3 times to put my horse and me over the cliff edge into the surf. I do not know that road so much as I know the feel of it, and that night I could not feel it at all under the flooding dark. Twice the horse balked, and I could not blame it. Twice I got down and led it by the bridle along the worst of the cliff path with the sea roaring invisible below us, and both times when I got back up, I turned its head north again. Because here is the thing the bond does, the thing I had spent 3 years pretending I could live without. I could feel her, faint and far, like a lamp seen across miles of moor, but there. She was alive. She was afraid. I could feel the edge of that too, the way you feel cold coming off a window, and under the fear she was holding, and I understood that every hour I did not reach her was an hour she stood alone at a gate she had every right to abandon and did not. I will not pretend I rode all that night thinking noble thoughts about my people. I thought about her. I thought about the rotted third step she had mended. I thought about the smear of iron across her cheekbone the first day. I thought, if she dies at that gate because I was too much a coward to stand at it beside her 3 years ago, there is no council in any kingdom whose forgiveness I will ever want again. The storm broke toward dawn, the way the worst ones do, going out all at once, wrung dry, leaving a gray, exhausted light and a sea still heaving from the violence of it. And in that first gray light I came over the last headland and saw Tittleholt below me, my leaning salt-trotted hold on its spit of black rock, and I saw the raider ships drawn up on the strand. And I saw the sea gate. It was shut, it was held. And on the gatewalk above it, small and dark against the paling sky, stood a single figure with a spear. She was still standing. I have fought in many actions since, and before, and I have never ridden the way I rode down that headland. The raiders were off their ships and massed at the strand end of the causeway, and I could see now what the weeping boy had not been able to tell me, that they had not yet taken the gate because they could not get at it in numbers. The causeway to the sea gate is narrow, 2 men abreast, no more, the sea on both sides, and at the landward end of it, where the causeway meets the gate, one person with a long spear and a barred door at their back can hold against many, if that one person does not run. She had not run. She had put the narrow causeway in front of her, and the barred gate behind her, and she had held the throat of the thing all night, one steady woman where a garrison of armed men had chosen to be somewhere else. I came off the headland and onto the strand behind the raiders, and I was one man, but I was an alpha king in the full grief and fury of a night's hard riding, and I want to tell you honestly that it was not my wolf that broke them. It was the sight of me. A king come home to a gate his own guard had abandoned. That is a thing that puts a superstitious fear into raiders who deal in the abandonment of gates for a living. I hit them from behind, from the strand, roaring, and they turned. And in the turning, the ones nearest the causeway lost their footing on the wet black rock, and I heard, over all of it, a voice from the gatewalk. Her voice, level and clear, and carrying the way it had carried across 3 years of my trying not to remember it. "To the causeway," she cried, not to me, to the hold behind her, to the Fisher families and the old ones she had sent up into the bell tower. "He's come. The king's come. To the causeway, all of you now, while they're turned." And the gate opened. She had roused them in the night. That was the thing I learned only after. She had not merely stood at the gate. She had gone up and down that hold in the dark hours, telling frightened people that the gate was held and would go on being held, that the king was coming, that no one behind these walls would be left to the sea. She had made 100 terrified souls believe a thing she could not be sure of, and she had made them ready. And when I came, she flung the gate wide, and 100 fisherfolk and grandmothers and half-grown children came out onto that narrow causeway with gaffs and boat hooks and gutting knives. And the raiders, caught between a roaring king on the strand and a roused hold on the causeway, broke. They broke, and they ran for their ships, and we let them run, because you do not chase a broken enemy onto the tide when you have 100 living souls to get back behind a wall. And when it was over, when the ships were pulling raggedly off the strand into the gray heaving sea, and the causeway was ours and the gate was ours, and the hold was ours and held, I climbed the gate stair I had not climbed in 3 years, past the 3rd step she had mended, up to the gatewalk where she stood leaning on her father's boar spear with her sleeves shoved to the elbow and a smear of something dark across one cheekbone. Exactly as she had stood the first day. And I found that I could not say any of the things I had ridden all night to say. She looked at me, level and clear. She was swaying on her feet with exhaustion, and she would not let herself fall while anyone could see. And she said, in the plain voice she had always used with me, "You're late." "I know," I said. "By about 3 years," she said. "I know that too," I said. And I got down on the wet stone of that gatewalk, in front of the whole roused hold, in front of the grandmothers and the fisherfolk and the children coming down out of the bell tower, and I knelt to her, a king to a gatekeeper's daughter, and I said the thing I should have said 3 years before I said it. I felt it the first day, I told her. The bond, when you told me to mind the rotted step, it didn't come to me like thunder, it came to me like coming home. Like I'd lived here all my life and only stepped out for the afternoon. And I was afraid of it because I thought this gate was doomed, and I thought loving you openly would only chain you to a doomed thing. So I rode away and I called it noble. I could barely get the words up past what was in my throat. It wasn't noble. It was the worst cowardice of my life. And you stood at this gate all night and held the thing I ran from, and I have never in my life seen anything as brave as you were on this wall, and I am asking you, not as your king. I have no right to ask you as your king. I am asking you to let me stand here beside you for the rest of my life at the gate you would not leave." She was quiet for a long moment. The sea heaved, and the gray light came up, and somewhere below a child was crying and being hushed. "Rannoch," she said, and it was the first time in 3 years I had heard her say my name, and it undid me. "Get up off the cold stone. You'll take a chill, and then who holds the gate?" "Is that a yes?" I said from my knees. "It's a get up," she said, and there was the smallest crack in the level voice, the first I had ever heard in it. "The yes is older than the storm. The yes has been standing at this gate for 3 years waiting for you to come and stand at it too." I got up, and I did not sweep her into my arms the way the songs would have it, because she was swaying with exhaustion and so was I, and because that was not who we were. I stood beside her at the sea gate, our shoulders nearly touching, and we looked out at the raiders' ships growing small on the gray water, and after a while, without looking at me, she put her hand flat against my chest, over the heart, the way you might test a wall to see if it will hold. And I put my hand over hers. And that was all. That was everything. The garrison came back 3 days later. Captain Oren came down out of the high country with the horses, and the men once word reached him that the hold had held and the king had come home. And I met them at the landward end of the causeway, at the very throat of the thing she had held alone. And I watched Oren's face as he understood where he was standing and what had happened on the ground beneath his feet, while he was warm and dry in the high country. I had ridden all night with a fury in me that I thought would end at Oren. I had thought about what I would do to the man who took the horses and left 100 souls to the sea. But standing at that gate with 3 days' clear light behind me, I found the fury had gone somewhere else in the night, and what was left was only very tired and very sure. "You left the gate," I said to him. "My lord," he began. "You left the gate," I said again, and she held it. A gatekeeper's daughter with her father's spear held the gate your garrison ran from. There are 100 people alive behind that wall this morning, and not one of them owes their life to you. I let him stand in that. By every law of the hold I could hang you at the gate you abandoned, and there is not a soul here who would speak against it." He said nothing. He was a coward, but he was not a stupid man, and he knew what he had done. And then a voice beside me, level and clear, said, "No." Eibelin had come down to the causeway. She looked at Oren the way she looked at everything, straight and unafraid, and she said, "Don't hang him at the gate. We've had enough death at this gate to last 100 years, and hanging a coward doesn't unspill a drop of it. Let him carry water instead." She turned to me. "The bell tower cisterns cracked from the winter. It'll want carrying full by hand, bucket by bucket up the tower stair, every dawn until it's mended and the mending's paid for. Let him carry it. Let the whole garrison that ran carry it dawn by dawn, where the hold can watch them do it, until the hold decides they've carried enough." And that is what we did. It was a harder sentence than hanging in its way, and a kinder one, and it was hers, and it was right. The garrison that fled the sea gate carried water up the bell tower stair every dawn through that whole spring, bucket by bucket, past the mended 3rd step, in full sight of the people they had abandoned. And slowly, dawn by dawn, the hold stopped spitting when they passed, and then stopped watching them at all. And by summer Oren was just a man who carried water and had once done a shameful thing and was trying, in the slow, plain currency of labor, to be forgiven for it. The last I saw of him, he was teaching a fisher child to splice a rope, and the child was laughing, and I thought, that is what her mercy makes, where my fury would have made only a body at a gate. I offered her the world after. I want that set down. When the spring came and the crown, shamed by the story of a coast hold that it held when its own garrison fled, finally sent timber and coin and men to mend the frontier it had meant to abandon. When Tittleholt was suddenly no longer a doomed gate but a famous one, the gate that held, I took her up onto the gatewalk one clear evening, and I offered her everything I had once been too afraid to think she could have. "You never had to stay here," I told her. You stayed at a gate you thought the crown had given up on, and now the crown hasn't given up on it and you could have anything. I could take you inland to the green country, to a hold that isn't rotted through with salt. I could set you somewhere the fog never comes. You've earned a gentler place than this. Say the word and it's yours, the boat's in the water, there's coin enough, there's a whole soft kingdom south of the fog. I won't chain you to this gate again. I did that once by leaving. I won't do it by staying. The choice is yours. It was always supposed to be yours. She stood on the gatewalk in the clear evening light and looked out at her sea, because it was hers, that gray heaving northern sea, more than it had ever been mine, and she was quiet for a while. Then she said, "You're a fool, Rannoch." "I've heard," I said. "I didn't stay for the crown," she said. "I never once cared whether the crown had given up on the gate. I stayed because it's my gate. My father kept it and his mother kept it, and I mended the third step with my own hands, and there are 100 people behind it who sleep easy because someone stands at it who won't run." She turned and looked at me, level and clear, in the plain voice that had arranged 3 years of my life around the certainty of her. "You can stand at it with me, or you can go carry water with Orin. But I'm not leaving my gate for a soft kingdom south of the fog. What would I do there? Who would mind the rotted step?" And she smiled, the second crack in the level voice, the second in 3 years, and I understood that I had offered a fish the sea and asked if it would prefer a nicer bowl. I did not take her to the green country. I stayed at the gate. We are old now, she and I, and the gate still stands, and it is still held, and the crown long ago stopped pretending it might abandon this coast, because the story of the night the gate held has grown in the telling until they'd sooner abandon the crown itself. Young folk come sometimes to see the famous sea gate, and they are always disappointed to find it is only a barred door of black timber at the end of a narrow causeway, salt-rotted and plain, with a mended third step on the gate stair. They want it to be grand. They want the gate that held 16 raiderships to look like something. But she and I know what held that gate, and it was not the timber. It was one steady woman who would not leave a thing she had promised to keep, on a night when the armed men ran, and the king had not yet learned to come home. I ran from the best thing the world ever gave me and called it noble, and she stood at a doomed gate all through a storm and never once called it brave. She called it minding the step. I go up onto the gatewalk most evenings still, when my knees will let me climb the stair. She's usually there before me, leaning on the rail watching her sea, and I stand beside her, our shoulders nearly touching, the way we have stood for 40 years, and every single evening before I say anything else, I say the same thing to her. I say it because I owe it, and I will go on owing it as long as there is breath in me to pay. I say I'm here. I came home, I won't be late again. And every evening she says the same thing back, without turning from the sea, in the level voice I would know in the dark, at the bottom of the ocean, at the end of the world. She says the gate's still held. It'll be held when you come. It always was. It always will be. And I have spent every day of the 40 years since that storm trying to be worth the woman who never once left the gate.